Hi, Stan. Hi, Danny. My name is Neil. I'm with Dorkaholics, where we believe that there's a dork in everyone. It's our job to bring that dork out into the world.
Uh-huh. Well, I see that racket behind you. I like that. I like that look.
Thank you.
Do you use the racket?
Yes, I mean, it's been a few months since I've played, and even before that, I played 1 year of high school tennis, and I played every few semesters when I was in college, just because there was like a intramural class I could take. But I wish I was as
Great.
good as you, Stan.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah. I After watching Who is Stan Smith, it was an incredible journey for that hour and a half, just getting to know you and not just your level of skill and talent at the game of tennis, but also the true quality and nature of you and who you are as a human being.
Well, it was a fun experience. Danny really made it enjoyable. It's always awkward, I think, to have a documentary done on your life, and so it covered all the bases. That's for sure, throughout the whole film. So it got some of the highlights of my tennis career, and obviously followed a bit of the shoe as well, and some of the other opportunities I've had in my life, which have been made it more fulfilling.
What was it like for you to hear from loved ones, friends, family from throughout your life coming together to share what their experience has been like with you in their lives?
Well, it's fun. The most or many of the and most important people in my life were in the film, and so that was important, I think, as far as having that as a bit of a legacy of you know of my life as as a father and as uh, a husband and a competitor and a friend, and so I've been blessed with a lot of great relationships, which is really what it comes down to at the end, I think, not just accomplishments that take place.
Hmm. And and for Danny, what was it like for you to come into this project, knowing that you would get to create this documentary around literally who is Stan Smith?
It was a privilege. It was definitely a privilege. Uh, it's this name that we've heard throughout our entire life. I think Stan's peak in tennis, even when the sneaker came out, I was years away from being born. But I always knew about this mythical figure named Stan Smith. It was ubiquitous. You always knew about it. So it was a pure privilege, but then as I got into it, it was a pure joy to meet Stan and be welcomed into his family with open arms. Since then, we've remained so close in touch. Stan's even come over my house and met my sons. I mean, it's a family affair, and I think that's what Stan preaches the most is the importance of family. So not only was it a privilege and a joy, but I learned a lot from Stan. Um, I learned humility. I've learned the importance of family. I learned how your legacy is defined not only by your accomplishments, but what you do for other people. And if that may seem simple and almost trite, but it's the very essence of the film. As I was exploring it, I think the obvious approach is, okay, we're telling the biopic of the timeline of this iconic figure who won championships and had a sneaker. But I thought, as we unpacked this mystery, and even through the process of it, it was an exploration and a reveal that those two things were secondary to what's actually important, which are, doing good and doing right by people. Um, so yeah, that was a long way of answering your question, but it was a privilege.
Uh, Thank you for that, Danny. I know going into it last year we had Air and it told the story of Nike and Michael Jordan and the Air Jordans. And now this year we have Who is Stan Smith. So I'm just like, oh my God, there was so much rich history tying fashion and sports and athletes as well as like the story behind the shoes, essentially. Like, why did these corporate entities decide to approach these athletes and craft a shoe around them? How's it been for you, Stan, just to look back and I know at one point in the documentary you had told Donald, "Hey, I just want a racket deal or a club deal. I just want to focus on the game." What about this offer to have a shoe with Adidas? And I'm not sure at what point in time they said like, "No, we're gonna have Stan Smith on the shoe." But what was it like for you? What made you say yes?
Well, Adidas was and still is one of the great brands, and it was a real honor to be connected with Adidas. In fact, Adidas had an agreement with the ATP, so all the ATP players could wear, clothes, and they outfitted all the players for a number of years. And this shoe was the first leather tennis shoe ever made, and it was exciting because we wore canvas shoes before that, and they weren't as sturdy, and they didn't last as long, and they weren't as they didn't look as good after a few sets of playing, and these leather shoes were pretty neat, and uh, so they were high tech, which is ironic to say that because when people ask me should they wear my shoe to play tennis, I say absolutely not. They're better shoes now. The Barricade that Adidas makes is probably the best shoe out there, and so it's not necessarily a performance shoe anymore, but it's now more of a fashion shoe. And of course, people of all ages and both women and men, boys and girls, and older folks that have worn them for 50 years, make them unique. And so I was just fortunate to be in the right place at the right time with the right company with the right brand. And they put my face on the tongue. They really were looking for a great looking face. They couldn't find one, so they stuck with me because I was the number one player in the world at the time. And I thought it would be a 5 year sort of a thing, but it turned out to be another 10 years after that, another 5 years after that, and 50 some years later, it's still around. So it's I was very fortunate. I've been blessed tremendously with timing of things in my life, whether it's the pro game starting right as I finished college in 1968 to various things that have happened in my life with my wife and my family and the opportunities I've been given and for in some ways for no reason. It just happened to be great timing and opportunities that have been given to me.
And for Danny, I know you came from having experience working in the commercial side of shoots. You've collaborated with Adidas before, if I read correctly. What was it like for you to now tell the story of one of their most iconic shoes, the name behind the face on the tongue?
Again, I think it was a privilege.
Mhm.
I've directed all sorts of things from scripted to documentary to commercials. And I think a lot of my work has tended to center around culture because I think naturally as a human being, I grew up in Los Angeles around, participating in all sorts of subcultures from hip hop, skateboarding, graffiti. I was a video game nerd, all these things. And so these are all natural extensions of my own personal interests and passions. So it was amazing to have the honor again to tell these heritage stories that are singular and so iconic. I mean, you're talking about Stan's shoe that is over 50 years old and still is prevalent everywhere you turn. I mean, you can't walk in any major city and not see the sneaker. And some of the cut scenes from this, I actually had a scene where we went through New York City and asked people with sneakers, with stands on their feet, and said, and put them on camera and asked them, do you know who Stan Smith is? And not a single person actually knew that he was a tennis champion. Many didn't even know he was still alive. And so, that was illuminating. Again, there were all these things we had to cut from the film because you can't fit it all. But it was a privilege, and I got to thank Spring Hill because they were, obviously a big part of this as the studio behind it, and it was great. It was a really fun experience. We shot this during the pandemic. We had a lot of restrictions in terms of what we can shoot. Like one of the things I really wanted to shoot was Stan and his work with the Boys and Girls Club in Hilton Head, South Carolina. That's a big part of his life. And that probably was the most reflective of how he helps people. But we couldn't shoot it because they had no events going on. It was all Zooms. And so, it was really important to make sure we illuminate the fact that Stan, in the end, I think his greatest legacy was his humanitarian work.
And
I don't know if Danny knows this, but Neil, that one person in particular thought that I was dead and buried on the center court of Wimbledon. Now that might be the privilege. That should be something I'm going to shoot for, but that's certainly not right now.
and for my last question, Stan, like some people will say like, oh, athletes should just focus on playing their game and celebrities should just focus on whatever their craft is. But you truly embody that idea that we have a duty as human beings, if we have a platform, to use it for good, whether it was your work with AIDS activism, championing efforts to bring Mark from South Africa to America. What is your take on that? Like, is it the responsibility? Was it your responsibility with the platform that you have through your career and accolades, or is it just the human being thing to do that we should all do?
Well, I think it's both. I think hopefully it's what everybody would like to do, is to try to leave this place better than they had when they came to it. But the I learned that from Arthur Ashe, actually. A lot of influence from his mentality of trying to do something for those that aren't as fortunate, whether it's civil rights or just uh, any sort of illnesses or perspective that people come from, that they can hopefully do more with their lives, and if they're given the opportunity. And I think that that's one of the things I feel about it, is that we're all the same, and some of us, are able to do things because we're given the opportunity. And if we are given the opportunity, then I think it's a bit of a responsibility for us to take advantage of those talents that God's given us. And that's been my perspective really from my early 20s.
Thank you so much, Stan. Thank you, Danny. It's been a pleasure speaking with you both. I'm looking forward to the premiere of Who is Stan Smith, May 3rd.
Thanks, Nick.
See you in LA.